Hello friends, in one of my videos about Foundry, someone complained that I would probably be killing myself doing these videos in an apartment. Or worse still, I might kill someone who's gullible enough to copy the things I was doing. The truth is, I'm not going to avoid doing a video on how to make a salad just because someone might cut himself with the knife. I trust people have a survival instinct that make them be careful in how they do things, find out first how to do them. I can't explain this in every video, especially because it isn't exactly black or white. However, I made this video now to explain for those who want to experiment with non-ferrous foundries, explain which are the risks and how they can make these risks not so important. This doesn't mean that they won't get burnt. Accidents happen. Okay, I hope you can excuse me, but this video is going to be very long and you should see all of it, because there's no video or writing or text in the internet that explains with full details the risk for a small or mini foundry. In the description, I'm going to leave a list of the topics so you can find them easily in this video. Okay, now to begin with, I must explain that the vast majority of studies and information on risks in foundries are focused on big or medium-sized foundries. Even small industrial foundries handle much bigger volumes than what you can find in an art foundry or in a jeweler's workshop, where casting tasks are more like something sporadic or occasional. These workshops fall into the category of micro-producers of pollutants, and the information about the big foundries are not applicable to these. Specific studies about micro-producers are very scarce, and I would dare to say that the effects and importance of these are dismissed, as would be the case for those small foundries inside your home, unless you're working with acids, lead, or other toxic material. In the world, we might have thousands, if not millions, of little workshops for art foundry or jewelry with non-ferrous metal. The fact that there are risks in working in foundry should not be a reason to constrain or limit these activities. Instead, we should establish the rules of good practices so that these activities can be performed safely. It is the duty of the government to establish the structure and organization that will let us perform these activities safely in terms of personal safety and environmental safety. In this video, I'm going to describe the main issues and risks when working in foundry, especially with the lost wax method and permanent molds of steel, and with propane gas. Foundry with other methods like green sand, coal foundries, and petrol foundries, they have other kind of risks, and I won't touch those in this video. Let's start with a general view of this topic. In any activity where there's some risk to your health or to the environment, we must consider a series of elements. First of all, have a very good extinguisher at hand. Also, we can have other elements to fight and put out fires. The top of a pot, wet cloth, and of course, a metal pail to put out fires. Depending on the size of the fire, of course, the elements we should have at hand. A bucket full of dry sand, a pail of water, and we must learn how and when to use them correctly. Always use your personal protection equipment. A good mask, N95, can be with filters or those simple ones that just cover the face, or a homemade one but with many layers. Also use safety shoes or covers for your shoes, made of leather. Good leather gloves, a thick pair for very hot parts and thin pairs when you need to manipulate small things. a good leather apron to protect your clothes and your front, a face shield or goggles, better face shield that will cover your whole face. What? Ah, yes, of course. Long leg trousers to protect your legs from burns. Don't pull up your sleeves. Keep them down with thick material shirt, thick material trousers to protect your skin. You should always have at hand first aid materials, especially those for treating minor burns. You must always ensure good ventilation, a good airflow in the environment so that you can bring down the temperatures. And if you're capable, if you can make a hood and a chimney above your foundry, much better. Let's see now which are the kind of risks we can suffer in a mini foundry like this one. When working with wax, we can suffer burns. We can inhale the gases from the burning wax, and even the wax can burn and catch fire. However, all these risks are considered of low danger or minor danger. Usually we prepare the wax in a steam bath, but if we have residues of wax on the apparatus, they might catch fire if they get in contact with the flames, as you will see here. If this happens, we have to turn off the gas and cover the flames with a wet rag. That way we choke the flame and we can put it out. To avoid this, we must remove every bit of wax that might come in contact with flames. When we want to pour the wax into our molds, either for the vents or the molds itself, it's quite common that the wax will pour over the mold and onto our fingers. It spills all over and we burn our fingers. To avoid this, we can use gloves or we can use some sort of tongs to hold it while pouring in the wax. When we put our mold with our wax figure inside an oven or in a furnace to remove the wax, there's always a risk of getting burnt with the hot wax and also with the hot surfaces. If we heat up this mold with a blowtorch, the wax can catch fire, which is a risk of fire, apart from producing organic toxic gases. All these risks can be avoided working carefully using the proper protective personal equipment and ensuring good ventilation, good airing in the environment. Of all these, the only risk that is considered dangerous is suffering burns, which can be serious if we don't use proper protective equipment. At this stage, the only risk is inhaling silica dust. When mixing plaster with silica, usually it forms a cloud of this silica just around the container. So that forces us to use a proper respirator mask with proper filters for particulate material. Silicosis is a serious and irreversible illness. However, to suffer this illness, the exposure to silica dust must be intense over a short period of time or for a long period of time with lower intensity. These levels of exposure, we find them in the mining industry, in the construction industry, in environments where they use cutting tools or crushing tools or tools for boring holes in materials where they produce these clouds of silica. Removing the residues of molds using dry compressed air promotes clouds of dust in the environment and should not be used. We must use jets of water or water beds. For these reasons, it is not recommended to crush old molds to use that same material to make new molds, unless you have the proper infrastructure to control the amount of dust that gets up in the air. While we're melting the metal in the foundry, we can suffer splashes and explosions that can send the metal for at least a meter or more around. And that can happen in the following cases. The presence of water and foreign matter inside objects we have put in contact with the melted metal. When organic material comes into contact with the molten metal, like for example, moist wood. There's also products that when they come in contact with high temperatures, they behave explosively, like aluminum dust. We can avoid these problems by examining the materials, the metals, and cleaning them before putting them inside the crucible with our molten metal. When we remove the crucible from our furnace to pour the metal into the mold, it is very common that we suffer of metal splashing or spilling over. If this material falls on combustible materials, even some clothes, we will probably start off a fire. This can also damage surfaces that are not combustible, like some clothes, shoes, ceramics, and it can cause serious burns in people because it can even burn through clothes and shoes. If a crucible cracks or breaks, it can spill molten metal all over combustible materials and start a fire. This is a likely event when we don't know which is the useful life of a crucible, and we don't examine it before starting up a cast. We mustn't leave casting material inside a crucible, because it can hide a failure, a hole inside our crucible, and we won't see it till it starts flowing out of the crucible in our cast. To avoid these dangers, what we have to do is establish the routes we're going to take with the crucible from the furnace to a place where we rest the crucible, and from this part to the mold. We take the crucible out of the furnace, we put it in this tool that we use to transfer the crucible, using proper gloves on both hands, and we take it over to the mold. And this area we must create kind of pools that will hold any spill of the metal, molten metal. This area, the route towards the mold, and around the mold also these pools to hold any molten spill. We also have to make sure that all this area is free of any combustible materials like paper, cardboard, wood, etc. And also free of any other materials that might react with the molten metal. It's also important that the tool that holds the crucible is long enough so we can keep our hands away from the crucible, from the heat, using gloves on both hands, of course. And when we take the crucible with the molten metal across to the mold, do it the lowest as possible. So if any spill happens, the spill will bounce and won't bounce too much. If we bring it at a high level, or we're standing up, for example, then it'll spill and it'll jump all over the place. When we forget that the tool we've been using is very hot, and we get hold of it with our bare hands, that's one of the main causes why one gets burnt in this kind of job. We have to always use our gloves, and the most important thing is to have an order with our tools, where we put them, and always keep that order, not break that order. We bring the crucible onto its spot, we put the tool with the hot part inwards and away from our hands. The iron piece that I use for moving around the metal and mixing with the flux always with the hot part away. The spoons for bringing out the flag also, they have a place where I leave them. And of course the flag we put out, we also have to put it in a place where it doesn't bother the rest of the activities or tools we have here. In all kinds of foundries, combustion produces heat and gases. The most usual gas is carbon monoxide, which is odorless, toxic, and deadly. But we also have smoke that includes particulate matter, metal oxides and residues of flux and other casting aids like borax, common salt, calcium carbonate, etc. This particulate matter emitted through the chimney of the furnace, and especially when we lift the cover, exceeds the recommended limits for the workplace. For this reason, we must always use respiratory protection while casting. The environment where we cast our metals can increase its temperature very much if we don't have adequate ventilation. This temperature can get us dehydrated and can cause serious thermal stress if we can't get it down to a tolerable temperature. And it can even be deadly if we don't take it serious. Both the heat and the emissions of gases and particles can be minimized with a ventilation that ensures us that the air is renovated frequently through air currents. If by mistake we throw into our crucible bits of scrap that contain bits of rubber, plastic, paint, varnish, greases, and others, we can create toxic fumes that are toxic for people and environment. To avoid that problem, we must examine our scrap, clean it, take out all those bits of things that can produce toxic fumes, and then put them in our crucible. The light intensity coming from a furnace can cause eye injuries and skin burns. However, in such small-scale foundries, this is not a major issue. Sanding, filing, grinding, polishing produces fine dust. Aluminium dust produces health hazards. So we have to handle this material with respiratory protection. In contact with water, aluminium dust produces hydrogen, which is very explosive. Also, under certain conditions, aluminium dust can self-ignite, causing a fire. For the aluminium dust to catch fire, it must form a cloud of 40 grams per cubic meter, something equivalent to a few millimeters all over the floor. A cloud of dust with this density makes it difficult to see a 25-watt bulb 2 meters away. Additionally, there must be a source of ignition, the flame of a candle, welding sparks, or short circuit. This ignition can become explosive when the dust is dry and it occurs in a closed space. It can still explode in a place with open windows and doors, but with reduced effects. Aluminium dust can also become explosive if mixed with iron rust and while it is at rest, but only if subjected to a 2,700 Fahrenheit flame, as that we can get from a blowtorch, but not that from a match. This is called thermite reaction. For all this, after each procedure, we must do a good cleanup of our workspace and put all the aluminum dust and slag inside a container for later disposal. We can use a broom to clean up, but we must do it carefully so we don't lift up dust into the air. And we shouldn't use a mop due to the risk of having a chemical reaction with aluminum. Neither should we use a vacuum cleaner, because we can be accumulating dust inside a bag, a closed space, surrounded by sparks created by a motor. Also, there are a series of other recommendations. Even if they're obvious, we have to mention them. Don't eat, don't smoke, don't drink, don't do anything that can distract you from the task you're doing. Keep everything in perfect order so you know where everything is, even if you had your eyes closed. Never leave a blowtorch or a fire not attended. You must know which are the limits of your tools and respect that. And finally, but not less important, is our responsibility with the environment and with our neighbors. Likely residues of a mini micro-foundry like this one are the following: pieces of refractory bricks, residues of scrap, metal slag and shavings, residues of molds with silica and refractory plaster, water with plaster and silica from washing the molds, and finally, particulate matter in smoke. In general, with exception of aluminum, non-ferrous metal slag, and residues of refractory materials are innocuous. And given the small amounts produced by these micro-generators, disposing of these in landfills is not important. However, as they can be recycled, it would be much better if they were delivered to recycling plants. Those residues that contain silica, like bits and parts of molds, can also be recycled by the industry. But considering the small amounts produced by these micro-generators, it is recommended that they get together and store these materials in containers before delivering them to recycling plants. Aluminum slag must not be deposited in landfills where residential wastes are deposited, because it is a hazardous residue. It is capable of producing toxic gases when it reacts with water, and it can pollute the aquifers. Microgenerators must store these materials and deliver it to recycling plants. In the description below, I will leave a list of links and for documents where you can find some more information if you're interested. Well, that would be it for now. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please don't forget, give it a like, subscribe, share it, leave your comments below, and I hope you're okay. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.